everybody, and welcome to Week 11 predictions for the NFL season. Last week, I went 9-5 on my predictions, feeling pretty good. See how we do this week. Before we begin, I want to quickly say if you are new, subscribe, it would be greatly appreciated, and leave a like while you're at it as well. So, jumping right into it, Thursday Night Football, the 7-3 Washington Commanders are playing the 7-2 Philadelphia Eagles, and the Eagles are 3.5-point favorites. Both teams have been playing some really good football this season. Both teams obviously going to be fighting for that divisional crown. This is going to be a massive game towards deciding who wins the division this year. Washington coming off of a tough loss to the Steelers in a game that the ground game didn't get a whole lot truly going. And yes, it has 3 touchdowns on the day, but only 60 yards. It was more so a focus for the passing game because the Steelers did a great job in making them one-dimensional. The Eagles had a good win against the Cowboys, a blowout win in the game that they were expected to win because the Cowboys were so banged up and are still so banged up. But even then, I felt like the Eagles were definitely not playing a full, complete game. Saquon didn't do as much as I thought he was going to be able to do. Jalen Hurts still played well and played great. But at the same time, it just feels like that the Eagles are still leaving a lot on the table. Because for a game like that, I would have preferred to see them put up more points. Not to say 34 isn't a lot, but it is to say when you're playing a team like the Cowboys who have little to no offense going on right now, I would like to see you put up a bit more. But this should be a great game. Prime time, Thursday Night Football, a game to decide the division. I do still have the Eagles winning this game, in part because it is in Philly, and I do feel like Philly's ground game is going to be able to take advantage of the Commanders' ground defense, which didn't have a great game against Najee Harris. Now to get Saquon Barkley to go up against, going to be a tough matchup. Give me the Eagles. Next up, the Green Bay Packers at 6-3 and 6-point favorites are making the trip to Chicago, who are 4-5. The Packers are coming off their bye week and find themselves 2 games back of the Lions because of it. They have a good road ahead of them when it comes to trying to catch the Lions, and it all starts with this one against the Bears. This is their first divisional game of the season. It came 11 weeks into the season, and it comes with them just firing their offensive coordinator. The Bears had a good run there in the midpoint of all this, where they were playing some really good football, and I had them in my top 10 for power rankings. But then since then, they have just not been playing well. They're on a 3-game skid. The offense has gotten no production going. The offensive line is playing terribly. Caleb Williams is doing the best he can with what he's given. But the Bears are the case of having so much talent, but in the wrong areas. They have too many quality receivers and not enough quality offensive linemen. And defensively, they have a good chunk of quality D linemen, but not enough quality secondary players and even linebackers. It's weird for Chicago. They have, like, on paper, they have a pretty solid team, but when you put it together, it's not a great fit. And then now again, going against the Packers, the Packers have been able to hold their own against Chicago pretty consistently over the past 20 some odd years. So I'm going to go over the Packers in this one again. I do like how the Packers have been playing, and coming off the bye, I think they're ready to go, and they probably are eager to get back onto that field. So I do have the Packers in this one. Next up, the 2-8 Jacksonville Jaguars are making the trip to Detroit. They play the 8-1 Lions, who are 13-point favorites. And there's no beating around the bush. I could talk about both of these teams for as long as I want. At the end of the day, the Lions are who I'm going to pick to win this, no matter how much I try to give Jacksonville a benefit of the doubt, which not even a chance to do that because they played so poorly against Minnesota last week. So the Lions, with how they played last week against the Texans, the fact that they still came away with that game with a win, to me proves how great and how on a different level that team is. Because any other team in the past 50 years lose that game. That was the first time a team has won after throwing 5 interceptions and being down 15 plus points at any given time. They've come back with all that against them. 2 wins since 1970. This is not only a different Lions team, this is a different football team we're seeing. It is really impressive. Every single time they win, it feels like they're winning through a different way. No two wins look exactly alike. The Lions are a great team. I have them winning again this week. Next up, the Minnesota Vikings are 7-2 and 6-point favorites, making the trip over to Tennessee, who are 2-7. If Minnesota has a similar performance to what they had last week, I don't like their chances in. But I also realized going against Tennessee, who aren't that great of a team in their own right, and they definitely still could pull away with a win if they have a similar performance. I am going with Minnesota to win this game, in part because I don't believe they're going to have a similar performance. I have faith that Sam Darnold is going to bounce back in some way in this game, whether it's throwing one less interception and maybe making one extra throw to gain an extra 15, 20 yards on the day. I just think Sam Darnold is not going to be throwing 3 interceptions again, especially against a Tennessee secondary that isn't that great of a secondary. And by the looks of IG posts, that L'Jarius Sneed is beginning to check out on the season. Tennessee was a team that had so much potential entering the season. They had the talent to be a really good team. They were just missing the quarterback position. And it has definitely come back to bite them in this. So I do have the Vikings winning this one. Next up, the Las Vegas Raiders at 2-7, making the trip to South Beach, playing the 3-6 Miami Dolphins, who are also 7.5-point favorites. I really liked how Miami beat the Rams. It wasn't a pretty win. It was a kind of an ugly win, especially the first half. But the second half was some really good football, in part because it was some really good complementary football. Dolphins scored on every single drive in the second half. The defense made stop after stop when needed to, forced 2 turnovers. They played really well. I'm just worried about the first half performance by Miami's offense. But at the same time, the Rams do have a really good front seven that is not to be taken lightly. Miami needs to get the ground game going in this one. I think we've seen over the past few weeks that when the ground game is working for Miami, it makes their offense run a lot better. And the Raiders are a weird team in the sense that, if similar to the Titans, they had the talent to begin the season. They were just missing the quarterback position, and turned out Gardner Minshew wasn't the guy to lead the way in that aspect. I still think the Raiders can possibly do something this season in the sense of play spoiler, if anything. But I am a Dolphins fan. I'm gonna pick Miami to win this game. Go to 4-6 on the season, and this is it. You win this one, and you start building these wins and rattling them off against these teams. Hey, look out for the Dolphins come end of the season. I think they get their 4th win in this one. Next up, the Los Angeles Rams at 4-5 and 5-point favorites, making the trip to the New England Patriots, who are 3-7. The Patriots got a pretty nice win over the Bears last week. It was definitely more so a defensive masterclass by New England, less than an offensive showcase. But the offense still did enough to win that game, still played well. In a game that was eerily similar to week 1 for New England, in the case of the offense doing just enough and this defense really showcasing why it is still a great defensive unit. Meanwhile, the Rams are looking to bounce back after that loss to Miami on Monday Night Football. And New England could be a tough matchup for them because of New England's defense. But where the things are going to differ is New England's offensive production. And plus, I don't think the Rams offense is going to go out sad like that 2 weeks in a row. So I do have the Rams winning this game. I think Cooper Kupp, I think Stafford, I think Puka Nacua, I think Kyren Williams. I think those 4 guys are not going to let this team have a poor offensive showing again where they don't score a touchdown. So with that being the case, I do think the Rams at least score 1 touchdown. And considering that 1 touchdown could be a big difference in a game like this, I think it will be enough. And the Rams will win this one. Next up, the Cleveland Browns at 2-7 make the trip as they play the New Orleans Saints, who are 3-7 and 1-point favorite. Very similar to the Germany game last week. This is a game that you can flip a coin and pick whoever it lands on. I have no real idea of who's going to win this game. Besides the fact New Orleans got a really nice win against Atlanta next week in the first start for their interim head coach. Meanwhile, Cleveland is a lost franchise. They have been since they re-entered the NFL in 1990. It's really hard to pinpoint what kind of a team they are. They do have Jameis Winston behind center. I do think he has been an improvement to Deshaun Watson in the 2 games he has played so far. Just because he's someone new behind center that can make some more that is willing to take more of those risky throws that it felt like Watson was willing to make. This is still going to be a tough game. I am leaning Cleveland. I do have Cleveland to win, but it won't be by much if they do win. And I also wouldn't be shocked if New Orleans still pulls up with the win. It's just this is a game that if you're a Browns and Saints fans, I'm hoping you also have a different game on in the background because this could be a very ugly one. Speaking of games that have on in the backgrounds during ugly games, the game of the week, basically, or second game of the week, as one was there's one more that we'll be talking about a little bit later. But the Baltimore Ravens at 7-3 and 3.5-point favorites travel into enemy territory as they play the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are 7-2. Much like the Bears, this is the Steelers' first divisional game of the season, and they're 7-2 entering it. They played a hell of a game against Washington last week in what was a very easy game, not easy, but very even game between the two teams. But the mistakes that the Steelers made last week against Washington, they cannot afford to make against Baltimore this week. And that goes to the special teams errors. That goes to the offensive errors, like the fumbling and all that. You can't afford to make those kind of mistakes because on the other end, you have Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, who, no matter what defensive front you're going to show at them, will find a way to at least get 3 yards a carry. Baltimore has been playing an incredibly offensive game the past few weeks. I would like to see the defense step up a bit. It was a really bad showing against Cincy last week, but with the way the offense is playing, you can kind of forgo it and be like, hey, we'll beat you in a shootout. We do not care. I was going back and forth between this one. I had Pittsburgh earlier in the day. Since then, I've kind of leaned more towards Baltimore. I do have Baltimore winning currently, but this is going to be a very, very, very good game that I am so excited to have this on in the background during the Dolphins game because, man, this is going to be an absolute dogfight to showcase why the AFC North is one of the best divisions in the NFL. Next up, the Indianapolis Colts at 4-6 make the trip to New Jersey. They play the Jets, who are 3-7 and 4-point favorites. This is another game where I feel like it could go either way, but I also feel like it's a pretty surefire case. The Colts have been playing very weird the past few weeks. Nothing really fully going, and when it is going, it's not consistent at going. Like Flacco, 3 interceptions last week. One of them was a pick 6 on the first drive of the game. And then the defense. I mean, the defense played well against the Bills, but in a sloppy game for Buffalo's offense, they still put up 23 points, which would have been enough to win even without the pick 6. I know Jonathan Taylor has been a bright spot to this Colts team that really they've needed. And in a game against the Jets, whose defense has been very questionable this season, especially against the ground, who knows? Maybe we could see something out of it. But I don't think the Jets internally can afford to lose this game. This is a must-win game for New York if they want to keep the season alive, as they do not have an easy schedule after this game. There's a lot of tough teams ahead for the Jets. This is the game that it feels like they need to win, and I would not be surprised if internally they feel this way as well. So this should be a great game for the Jets. I do have the Jets winning. I do think it will be a pretty convincing win, but even with saying that, it is against the Colts, who really could pull magic out of their asses if they want to, in a way. But I do have the Jets winning this game. Next up, the Atlanta Falcons at 4 travel to the Mile High City. The Denver Broncos at 5-5 and 2.5-point favorites. Both teams had really tough and close losses the previous week. The difference is how they lost and who they lost to, obviously. The Falcons losing a 3-point game to the Saints in what was really a game they probably should have dominated and played a lot better in, besides only putting up 17. It's just the Falcons offense has been very inconsistent, yet also consistent this season, in a sense of you can kind of be confident in saying that when they have a really, really good game, they're going to turn around and have a mediocre to kind of abysmal game. Meanwhile, Denver, that loss to Kansas City was 100% some devil magic going on there. Like, yes, it was also just really bad special teams play, and I'm seeing the breakdowns of it, but come on. It was a really, really tough loss. In the game that Bo Nix played really well in, having 2 touchdown passes, throwing the ball well, and the ground game working decently well. The big thing, though, for Denver was their defense. Only holding the Chiefs to 1 touchdown in that game should have been a recipe for success, and it nearly was. I do have the Broncos winning this game because I think even in the loss, the Broncos gained a little bit of confidence in themselves and momentum in the season to be able to build off of that loss in a better way than how Atlanta is trying to build off of their loss. So I do have Denver winning this one. Next up, the Seattle Seahawks at 4-5 are making the trip into enemy territory as they play the San Francisco 49ers, who are 5-4 and 6.5-point favorites. The big thing with this one is it is CMC's second game back. Everyone talks big about, first game back, how they're going to play in it. I've never wanted to really put a lot of chips in the basket of a first game back from injury because it is a massive trend that during that first game back, they're typically not going to play as well as they did before the injury and how they're going to play after it most likely. So this is the big game for CMC. Can you get back to that CMC way that we saw last year in this one? This is the game I'm more so focusing on for CMC. And it's against a Seattle team that when these teams played last, were not able to guard against Jordan Mason and that San Francisco ground offense. So I'm expecting CMC to have a massive day, either through the air, either through the ground, or most likely both. I do have the 49ers winning this one in large part because it is CMC's second game back. And now that he has a feel for the game again after that first game, he's ready to hit the ground running, and would not be surprised if the first offensive play for San Francisco is something to CMC that goes for 10-ish yards. So I do have the Niners winning this one. Now for the massive, massive game of the week, the Kansas City Chiefs, who are still undefeated at 9-0, making the trip to Buffalo, who are 8-2 and 2.5-point favorites. This is going to be an absolute showstopper, barn burner of a game. What, as of right now, seems to be a clear preview of the AFC Championship game. And this is going to be a game that's going to come down to the wire. It's just the nature of this. What also is the nature of this is this will probably be the game that we see KC's offense finally hit the ground running and finally playing an elite style, as they're going to need to if they want to win this one, most likely. Buffalo, again, it was a sloppy game against the Colts last week, but you can also just jot that off as they were more so looking towards this game, having the confidence that they'll be able to beat the Colts and turn it on if they need to. This is in Buffalo, which should be a great game. I have the Bills winning, in part because of how the Chiefs have been playing, and my expectation that even if they turn it on and start playing a lot better, it's the first week of them turning it on, and it will take at least a week for the engine to fully rev up. So if they would have had a much better showing against Denver, then I would have been more confident in KC in this week. But because they didn't, I do have the Buffalo Bills. Now for Sunday Night Football, the Cincinnati Bengals at 4-6, making the trip across country as they play the Los Angeles Chargers, who are 6-3 and 1.5-point favorites. The Bengals offense played an absolute showstopper, incredible game against Baltimore on Thursday Night Football. Like, it was an insane game to have in a losing effort. But the Chargers defense isn't the Ravens defense. They are a better, at least a more consistent defensive unit. The Chargers offense isn't as electrifying as the Ravens offense is, but they have a very similar mindset where if they can beat you through a ground and pound smash mouth style, they're going to beat you with smash mouth. And if anything, the Chargers would prefer smash mouth, whereas the Ravens, they can play smash mouth, but they do prefer more of a spread style of offense. So, this is going to come down to Cincy's defense versus the Chargers offense, most likely. I don't have faith in Cincy's defense with how they've been playing recently. So even with the Chargers wanting to play Smash Mouth, I would not be shocked if Herbert finds himself having an incredible day, similar, not up to the level, but a somewhat similar level to what Lamar Jackson had last week. I do have the Chargers winning the game for it. But even though I can see Herbert having this massive game, I am more so focused on J.K. Dobbins and the style of game he's going to have, and what should be an incredible day for him on the ground in some capacity, or even if it's through the air and checkdowns and all that. I do expect J.K. Dobbins to be the big weapon in this one. Finally, to cap off Week 11, Monday Night Football, the Houston Texans at 6-4, making the trip to Dallas, who are 3-6. The Texans are 7.5-point favorites. The fact that the Texans lost in Week 10 is an absolute embarrassment to that franchise and that fan base, because that was a game that they should have won. And again, in 100 different matchups between that exact same different game, and like all the events play the same up until the fourth quarter and the second half, most likely the Texans do end up winning that game. But they don't. And now they find themselves against a Cowboys team that is really banged up, coming off of a tough, bad loss against the Eagles. The Texans, they need to bounce back. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of pressure on them, as most of the other teams in their division are hot garbage. But they still need to prove to others that last year wasn't a complete fluke of a season, with the fact that they had a really good season. They won a playoff game, and Stroud was looking like a true MVP candidate last year. So far this season, he's been playing well, and so have the Texans, but is nowhere near to that level. I feel like they're going to need a dominant win in this one, in part because Cooper Rush, I believe, is the starter for Dallas, although who knows, they did sign Will Grier, so there might be a little bit of a QB competition in practice this week, probably not though. I do have the Texans winning this one in what is by no means a must win, or by no means a must dominate. This is a game that they need to win just to get back confidence in themselves. But if they dominate, it's going to put the league back on notice that, yeah, last game, how the offense played, don't expect that to happen too often, because it has been 2 weeks in a row of really bad performances by this Houston offense. But I do have them winning on Monday Night Football. There you have it, my predictions for Week 11 of the NFL season. Thank you all for tuning in and watching. Subscribe if you're new, greatly appreciated. And leave a like if you haven't already. See you all next time. Have yourselves a damn good one. Peace.